you. I'd like to introduce Brant Rosen. He's a longtime activist in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. He is the founding rabbi of the congregation CISIC Chicago and the co-founder of the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council. Let's give a good welcome to our panel, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. So, it is my honor to be here with two local students, and my job is really to ask a few questions and then really let them tell their stories. And we'll do our best to leave some time. Ron, do we have time for conversation, question, and answer as well? Okay.
I'll have a mic over here for some questions.
So, just briefly, you saw very quickly during the film a kind of a montage of the various campuses across the country where there were encampments. And I was thrilled to see Northwestern and DePaul was represented. It was my honor personally as an individual and as the rabbi of a congregation, representing our congregation to participate in both encampments at DePaul and at Northwestern. And we've invited two students who were leaders and participants in those encampments, in those encampment movements. And I think DePaul and Northwestern have some similarities to what you saw in the film at Columbia, and also some differences between the two campuses that I'd like to let our panelists speak to. So our first is Owen Howard, who is a graduate student at DePaul University. And we are also joined by Salma Ben Amer, who is a senior at Northwestern. My first question for both of you is to say a little bit about the experience at your campus of the encampment movement. How did it begin? How did it grow? And how did it evolve? And then we'll take it from there. So we'll start with Owen.
Oh, me.
Do you have a choice?
Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here tonight. I go to DePaul University. We were really inspired by Columbia. We watched this mass movement, and it kind of did feel like it was just inevitable that something would happen. I never thought it would be an encampment. I didn't know if the momentum was there, but there had been whispers about like the idea of doing it around different organizers within our campus. And then we got word that like there was really something getting started. So behind the scenes, students do a lot of work. It sometimes feels like being a student is my second job. I feel like an organizer sometimes because of how much I'm doing behind the scenes. Like, as I saw like a lot of the Jewish students at Columbia, those people I'm always in contact with. Whenever they're doing actions, we're talking with each other. We're discussing these types of things. So behind the scenes, it's kind of like a spider web of people talking with each other. The day of, I was really struck by the kind of comment about like Hins Hall, like the reaction right after. Like, it felt quiet, like weirdly quiet. You expect that there should be something happening. And I was terrified those first few moments before we set up that encampment. There was like, one student was like kind of beating the drum a little bit, like an actual drum. And we were like, it felt like those movies where the music starts cueing in, like something big is about to happen. And it did feel like something big was happening, but there wasn't a huge reaction by our university at first. But it grew really, really quickly. Our campus is pretty small, so I think students were kind of pulled into our activities, the ability to engage with our community, interact with new people, and engage in a way that like didn't feel forced by the university. It really felt like it was the will of the students in our outside community that brought that together. I think I'll save like how it ended. Okay. So, yeah. Oh, that's fine.
Hi everyone, I'm really honored to be here, and it's really beautiful to watch this entire room be full. I don't know, it never gets old seeing people gather for the purpose of freeing Palestine, so I'm really humbled and honored to be here. So, about Northwestern's encampment. Where do I begin? So I'll share a funny story because I actually was in New York when Columbia's encampments happened, and I'm close with a couple students at NYU who are on the board and presidents of SGP there. And as I was watching, this very momentous action sort of start to take roots in Columbia, all I wanted was to witness it, be there as in any capacity, and sort of study from it in a way. I think the entire school year last year, Columbia had sort of been the leader in student organizing, just in how I can't speak to how organized they are, but they seem to have their shit together, better than we did at least. So we were taking notes a lot from what they were doing, and there was that period in sort of towards the end of winter, as spring is sort of about to start, there was a weird lull where it was like, is anything going to happen? Like, the fall was pretty active in terms of regular protests and actions that we did. But it was weird coming back to campus and suddenly it was quiet. And I hated that. I really wanted something to continue to happen. And I think sort of those issues can be attributed to problems with organizing at Northwestern, but I think nobody really knew what to do. And so, I mean, once we saw Columbia's encampments take off, that was sort of the cue we needed to do the same thing. And so I actually visited the encampment for a day, and then based off of my experience there, I knew that the same had to happen at Northwestern, and so I did as much as I could to help facilitate that start. I came back to Evanston to make sure that it actually happened. No expectations of how long it would last, where it would go, just that it needed to start, and sort of going from there. And similarly, as DePaul, the sort of growth of the encampment was genuinely exponential. Like, each day was exponentially larger than the last, and that was very overwhelming to see in a beautiful way, because I have been organizing for Palestine for the last 4 years as a student, and I have never, ever, ever seen the amount of mass support that I did last year at the encampment. And I think that was something that as I was witnessing it live, I was like, I need to never forget this, because if we accomplish nothing else, then the gathering that we've been able to facilitate here, the community that we've been able to facilitate here, is accomplishment enough. And I hope also that there were hearts and minds changed in the process, because the evidence was in sort of the laughter and smiles on everyone's faces, the shared purpose between everyone and why we were there. Genuinely had never witnessed anything like that at Northwestern, let alone across the entire country. So it was just it's something that I feel silly, honestly, sitting up here, being called a leader or like a participant of the encampment, because truly, like, the power of it came in the numbers, and it cannot be attributed to one individual or one student leader or anything like that. Like, the impact that the Northwestern encampment had on the entire Chicagoland area came from Chicago, and it would not have been possible without people like yourselves. So, thank you.
It was my honor together with members of my congregation, my synagogue, to lead Jewish rituals at both DePaul and Northwestern. And one of the things I noticed immediately is, and you definitely got a sense of it in the film at Columbia, that these were more than just protests. They were creating the world that they wanted to see. You know, there were food tents, there were first aid tents, there was education going on, there was a whole calendar of events of different community members and religions and indigenous groups that would come and present. You know, it was really, they were worlds unto themselves. So I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit about the environments that you created, that you helped to create on your campuses, that went beyond simply the demands, the political demands that you were making, as important and as critical as those were. Was there something larger, and to say a little bit about the nature of the worlds that you were creating and the communities you were creating on your campuses?
I think, especially for me, opening up dialogue with Jewish students, a lot of people had questions. I would help lead ritual for Shabbat and Havdalah service, and I think a lot of students wanted to learn about each other. There were a lot of students who didn't know a whole lot about Palestine. It would maybe be their first time really hearing a different side of the story, and they were interested in learning. People were interested in learning about different perspectives on Judaism. I mean, it's unsurprising to me that a lot of people, I don't think at a time like this I can be offended when people like assume things about religious Jewish people. Israel is acting, using Judaism as a shield to kind of cover up their, like, this nefarious, awful genocide. So people don't necessarily have, like, there are a lot of people who do have incorrect ideas about Jewish people at large. And having that dialogue and saying, hey, let me tell you about why I'm here today doing Havdalah. And it's more of a curiosity. I think people perceive it as this, like, there's malicious anti-Semitism happening at these campuses and encampments, but really people are just curious. And we have those open dialogues, and we shouldn't shame people for not knowing something, just as we don't shame people for not knowing about Palestine until 2023. I think that there was just a lot of curiosity by people, and that was embraced, and a lot of learning. And that community was something that I really enjoyed. And I think that, like, that was one of the best parts of the event for me, that curiosity and passion for learning and understanding other people's perspectives.
I definitely have to echo what Owen said about the education and the deep desire to learn and curiosity aspect of the encampment. I think a popular refrain, or like a popular term, or alternative name for the encampments is sort of this idea of like a people's university, or essentially, this idea that the learning and the living and the growing was happening, on the ground, like with your peers. There was really no hierarchy present at all. Just like there was something to learn from everybody. And I think as I was watching this film, I was really struck by the stark differences between the ways that universities in Gaza are regarded versus the way universities are regarded here. It's really devastating to witness the ways that the universities here have become the arbiters of violence, arbiters of war and occupation. And the universities in Gaza that I feel like have preserved the sanctity of learning and education are unfortunately the ones to be destroyed. So I feel like the part of the revolutionary aspect of the encampment was the decolonization, if you will, of education, of higher education in the United States, because the classrooms and the teachings that were taking place on De'Aaron Meadow were completely unlike the discussions or the seminars I was having in my actual classroom buildings. And so you just got a glimpse of what true education could look like. Education rooted in action and a sort of one that just didn't end at the books. There's like so much discussion of like theory and praxis and everything like that. I think schools here are a huge example of the way that education just ends at the books, at the theory. But truly, the encampment felt for the first time like you're putting your education into practice. You're building community in real time. You're messing up, but you are taking accountability for that mistake in real time and learning from that mistake. And so it was, ultimately Northwestern's encampment lasted 5 days, but I experienced a lifetime of knowledge within those days, truly, from the start to the end. I think even now I'm still pulling a lot of knowledge from it. Watching this movie, I was comparing and contrasting and learning a lot still. So definitely a rich lesson.
I'll ask a two-part question, and then we can maybe open things up. So if you could both say a little bit about how the encampments ended, both not unlike what you saw in the film, and also to talk a little bit about the current moment. You saw a little bit in the final subtitles in the film, but the crackdown has been fierce, to put it mildly. We just finished a graduation season in which there were some amazing, courageous graduation speakers. And so clearly the fire and passion for keeping this issue alive on campuses is still very much alive, despite the crackdown. But maybe say a little bit about what it's like to be university students in the current moment, as difficult and as painful and as challenging as it is.
For the first point, our encampment ended, I believe, on the early morning of day 17. So we lasted quite a while. I think that there was a combination of, I don't want to say inevitable, because nothing is inevitable. We do have the power to change anything. But I think there was obviously this political momentum that Columbia University established that said, when we sent in our police with riot gear, it's okay for every other university to do so. So there was that element, but I do think from behind the scenes, I do need to be a little bit critical of myself as an organizer, because for many of us, this was like the first real organizing experience we had. And there's a lot to learn. It's not to say that I do love my experience at the encampment, but it's also a learning experience for myself as an organizer. There were things that we could have done better. Sometimes it's very difficult to have very candid conversations with your fellow organizers about what the next step should be. Behind the scenes, that there's not arguing necessarily, but there are discussions that are happening about how to carry ourselves between these groups. So between defense, we have defense groups that were responsible for making sure everybody at the encampment was safe. What happens when those people aren't doing their jobs appropriately? What is the accountability? So those kinds of organizing tactics are things that I learned about, and how to conduct myself better as an organizer to ensure that we have better communication and that you kind of remove the ego out of organizing. Just to remind yourself, it's not about I'm criticizing you because I don't like you. It's I'm criticizing you because this is for Palestine. It's about centering Palestine and getting the best result that we can. So I think it was a culmination of we needed to be better communicators within our own groups, and we also were in this political moment where Columbia established that it was okay to just send in riot police and beat students at the early, I believe it was 4 or 5 in the morning. Just wake them up, rip people's hijabs off their head, push students to the street. no warning. But again, this political moment, there are two elements of this. There's a lot of political repression. DePaul University was one of the universities called to Congress. Our president was called to testify on anti-Semitism, where he lied several times about the state of SJP. He said they were suspended, which was not true. He said that we caused $500,000 worth of damages. Originally, that was an already inflated number of $180,000, which I know a guy who could do that for $2,000. So I don't know. So it's tough being a student with that political repression. There's a lot of times where I want to go out and I want to organize, but recently we had like a Passover kind of song circle on the quad where we had about 15 students just sitting peacefully singing songs. 3 police officers were called on us. It's hard being a student when there are loopholes being introduced. Recently we had a talk with admin where they tried to introduce a new policy that would rewrite all of previous policy to say that the word anti is not allowed to be used for any programming at DePaul ever. And my response is, what about anti-racist workshops? The Women's Center at our university has been conducting those forever, and they said, well, I don't know. They didn't have, I asked them straight up, I said, if I went to the Office of Student Involvement today and said, I want to post this flyer, what would you do? And they said, I don't know. They're trying actively to loophole themselves into silencing anti-Zionist voices, which means that we're doing something right. But also, I do feel this lack of momentum. I don't think that like I'm an innocent victim to like political repression without acknowledging that there has been momentum that has been lost. And we should see that, and we should say we need to keep up that momentum because the genocide is aggravating. This isn't about my comfort, my luxuries, how I feel. This is about centering Palestine at all times, making sure that when the genocide is aggressing, we have to respond accordingly. So when I go to protests nowadays and I only see 45 people versus 300, I get concerned, not only because of this repression, but also we do have a responsibility to remind ourselves that we have a responsibility for Palestine, because that's what it's all about. It's not about us.
Yeah, I wish I could report that the community was beautiful and that's where it ended, but unfortunately, the reality of the situation was we were in over our heads. Like I said, the encampment was exponentially growing every day, and as beautiful as that was to witness, there were a lot of factors that we were not, we did not consider or were not able to account for. And I think a huge reason for that is we made the mistake early on of, I think, trying to project the same exact methodology as Columbia onto Northwestern's, and our campuses are fundamentally different. I remember when I was at Columbia the second day, I believe, of the encampment, they had already gated the entire school off. You couldn't get in without an ID. And that is functionally the way that Columbia is. It literally sits in one block in the Upper West Side, I believe, of Manhattan. And it's contained in those 4 corners. Whereas at Northwestern, for those from the area are familiar, our encampment took place on a sprawling meadow that is literally impossible to contain. And that came with its own benefits. I mean, the sheer size of the support was reflected in the number of bodies circling through the meadow, but that also brought with it like safety concerns. So I think a couple things I'll mention is so by the first day I had been elected to represent the negotiations committee. This was not a job I really wanted, but it's still a responsibility that I fulfilled it at the end of the day. I did the best that I could, but as someone who who, a young organizer, I was not really used to the process of meeting someone at the table, someone who I fundamentally disagree with on a lot of things, and try to talk things out. That was just not my approach. That was its own, learning experience that I could write a whole book about, probably. But one thing that was constantly held as a specter over our head was the threatening of police at any moment. And I think in the same way that they did this to Columbia students with the threats of the National Guard, obviously NYPD was constantly, surveilling Columbia's campus. The looming threat of that truly terrified all of us because, unlike Columbia, the presence on Northwestern was less controlled, in that nobody knew the risk they were assuming by being on our encampment. Nobody knew what they were signing up for necessarily. You guys watched how reminders or risks were laid out very clearly for those who were stepping on the encampment at Columbia. We were unfortunately unable to do that because of just, again, the sheer size and the volume of the encampment. And so very quickly, the safety of those participating in the encampment was paramount to me and so many other organizers, and we had to really think about what is wise, what risks are wise to expose to these people that do not know. They did not know that police could have shown up at any second. And I lived with a lot of that paranoia for 5 days. There was not a moment where I did not think that EPD or CPD was going to come and clear the encampment. So those fears, and then also, as outside parties started to get more invested in the outcomes of the encampment, ultimately led to a lot of organizational discord that made it so that we were not able to tenably, realistically escalate if we needed to, or retaliate is not the right word, but sort of respond to whatever sort of reaction the university would place upon us. We did not have the faculties whatsoever to deal with whatever the university was going to impart on us. So essentially, after 5 days, we had been negotiating with the university for the majority of the time, and then ultimately we accepted a deal from the university that essentially said that, okay, if you guys take down the tents, we will give you X, Y, Z. But the strategy behind that was never to sort of, pack up our tents, go back home, and, end it right there. We always recognized that the tents, which became such a political symbol, were a major bargaining chip on our end. It expedited so much negotiating that had been at a standstill for so many years, because this is not the first time that divestment was brought up to administrators, but they had the luxury of completely dismissing us and completely, not even opening the door to hear us out. And so the encampment really gave us the platform and opportunity where we finally had the upper hand and the leverage to bring administrators to where we were and be able to sort of set the terms for where we wanted to go next. And we were trying our best to be as strategic as possible about that, in the hopes that, if we were able to make incremental progress, we could, reset, assemble, sort out the kinks within our organization, and then come back even stronger and potentially even have the capacity to escalate in the same way that Columbia students occupied Hamilton Hall, because we never wanted to take our focus away from divestment. That was never sort of that was never in the picture. We had the exact same mission and goal as everyone else in this country, which is that we were not going to leave until we achieved every single one of our goals. So that happened, and then unfortunately since then there's been a complete collapse of SJP at Northwestern. There was a, I mean, honestly, I'm still reconciling with it because I found my home in SJP, with other fellow Palestinian student organizers, and the power struggle and the ego of it all that took place after the encampment essentially turned the organization into something that no longer, is a very viable organizing, units or community. But as we navigate that mess, a very beautiful silver lining has developed at Northwestern, and that's our JVP chapter. I think that while, in the aftermath of the encampment, I think honestly this entire year, I've been feeling very jaded and very depressed about the state of organizing in this country. But truly, the only community that has, returned any of that hope has been Jewish Voices for Peace, because I'm sitting here and I'm hearing you talk about how connected you are to the Jewish organizers in New York. We literally do not have that. Like, SVP, oh my god, I could go on for days. It's a mess. But what SVP lacks, honestly, JVP really excels in, and I have so much admiration and respect for the work that anti-Zionist Jews do in our community, because literally without JVP, there would have been not a single pro-Palestinian action at Northwestern. And so I really want to sing their praises. It was also Evgeny who put me in touch with Rabbi Brant anyway, so shout out to him. Yeah, he's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I can sense myself starting to talk in circles here, but a lot has happened. A lot has transpired since the end of the encampment that I'm still personally wrapping my head around and trying to navigate, especially now as I graduate and step into another role that is not, organizing it within in a student capacity, but hopefully beyond that. But JVP has allowed me to feel grounded and still feel semblance of hope of how organizing in this country.
And Owen and Sama, I just want to say, as I listen to you both be so soul-searching and self-critical, to me, and I think to all of us here, that's a sign of how seriously you take the business of organizing, and how that you have been important, critical leaders on your campuses in your own right. And I think you did it as you were learning as you went. And as you both said, when you do it that way, mistakes are inevitably made. But you also learn and go forward. And I think we all here take great inspiration from both of you in the example that you set of knowing how daunting these challenges were, and that you forged ahead nonetheless, took stock of where things fell short, and we're in a moment of recalibration. We have a new reality now, and this is, I think, impingent on all of us to learn about strategically how we pivot in this particular moment. And they're after us. No.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's my long-winded way of saying thank you to you both for your leadership and for being here tonight and sharing your stories with us. I I see two people who have been waiting patiently at the microphone to ask some questions, so feel free. Yeah, just speak into it, nice and loud.
Okay. I want to echo what Rabbi Rosen said to both of you. I really, really appreciate the work you're doing and continue to do. I used to be I was also an organizer. I know how frustrating it can be, so I hear you and thank you. And my question is about the narrative and the story that's been told from encampments. I visited the University of Chicago encampment a few times and also DePaul. And then I did jail support for the JVP when encampments were disbanded. And my experience was that they were really beautiful, peaceful encampments with a lot of education going on and professors involved and learning and teaching. And I went to a Shabbat service. I mean, it was just like a million response. It was wonderful. And yet, when I talked to my friends, my progressive friends, especially my progressive non-Jewish friends, who are terrified of being anti-Semitic or being called anti-Semitic, the first thing they say every time is, oh, well, students were kept from their classes. Students were not able to graduate because they were kept from their classes. And I know I wasn't there every day at every encampment, but I have a suspicion that probably didn't happen at all. And maybe you can't answer the question, but why is the narrative so wrong?
I think that it's a loaded question. The first question of why. I think the Encampments movie really talks about why there's a concerted effort by these corporations to keep war going. How else are they going to get their weapons sold? How is information tech going to be utilized by entire countries? I mean, there's no bigger client than an entire country. I can't think of, sure you have a company here and there, but I can't think of a bigger company than the United States or Israel. They want to be using these weapons. They have a purpose to continue this narrative in the media, which of course is run by the same few people. 7 different companies own 90% of what you hear. I've heard that statistic echoed 3 million times in my life. But to answer your other question of why, how to combat this narrative, I think it's just I think we need to move on to the thing of so what? What if it wasn't completely peaceful? So what if it wasn't completely legal? I think of every time I hear that question, I think of Hin Rajab's voice in my head. I think of Allah al-Najjar, the family of my dear friend who's in Gaza today, being a doctor, receiving 9 of her 10 children murdered, and her 10th child coming to her unconscious, who will wake up one day and realize that all 9 of his siblings, born of the same flesh and womb, are dead. How do you condemn a person who lives like that and grows up to be resentful or even violent against the nation that did that to him, who did it illegally? And we see Mahmoud Khalil, who was detained illegally. I think the question now is we've moved on from conversations about legalities. We've realized that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, what are they doing? We had, I think you were at a synagogue that held somebody who had a warrant out by the ICC. What is our country doing? They are not obeying the law, so why do we continue to have discussions that prioritize legality and so-called nonviolence? Nonviolence is a tactic, it's not a politic. And as we've seen in Hin's Hall, sometimes you have to break a few windows. A window that costs maybe $50, what is that compared to hundreds of thousands of people's lives? I think we have to move on from these conversations and engaging with these conversations that continue to try to preach nonviolence. My answer to these questions nowadays, maybe I would entertain it a year or two ago, my answer today is so what? I guess that is what I would say.
I mean, honestly, like, Owen put all of my thoughts, like, summed up all my thoughts, but I'll just throw in my 2 cents. It gets to a point where you can't really concern yourself about the narrative, and I think it's easy for me to say that because I think coming from a background where I've organized around Palestine, in an official capacity, I guess, as a student for the last, 4+ years, but growing up, being pro-Palestine, it was not popular to be pro-Palestine. Like, not even, 2021, let alone 2014 or 2009 or, so on and so forth. So I feel like the narrative or who controls the narrative has never concerned me in the way that I move about my politics or the right or, wrong, so to speak, approach. I think that I fully just blanked what I was going to say. I had something more cogent to say, but I'll leave it at that. Essentially, there's more at risk than, a narrative that we frankly couldn't control even if we wanted to or tried. Oh, what I was going to say is that I think it's I think like right now we're witnessing the ways that if you are not, if you have not acknowledged the realities of the war crimes and decades of genocide and occupation on Palestinian people, you're kind of a lost cause. And second, with that said, they're also very much shooting themselves in the foot, where the realities of the genocide are speaking for themselves. Yeah. There's nothing really that spokespeople or government officials can say to sort of boogeyman student organizers out of their complicity and their own aiding and abetting of genocide. So yeah, that's essentially it.
Yes, thank you. I was a student at Columbia in 1968 and was arrested with 700 officers. I'm very proud of the students at Columbia now. And the thing about anti-Semitism and Zionism, I'm 100% Ashkenazi Jew, and I was partners with the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. It was massacre. So, but what do we do now? What do we do now to help the Palestinians in the age of Trump and the age of repression? It's the encampments can continue maybe or not. How do students at different universities voice their concerns? It's a big challenge, and I just want to commend you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think students are innovative. I think students are trying to experiment with new ways of escalation. We've seen a lot of students take on hunger strikes recently. I'm not sure how effective all of them are, but I think people are looking to the past to find new ways to escalate. And more importantly, I think that students are trying to change the narrative. I think what I said before really about stop engaging with these trying to condemn the Palestinians for how they respond. How do you condemn a people like that who are facing something like this? I think these are small ways that we can really change that window of what's acceptable and also escalate to attain our goals. So So I think the students are creative, and I think they are trying to find new ways that we can really attain our goals of divestment and financial disclosure. Sometimes that's new encampments, sometimes that's hunger strikes, sometimes that's disruptions. A friend of mine recently disrupted a tech AI event by Microsoft. They disrupted the whole event. They had to go online for it. They took away all the student tickets, which is really what they're there for. They're there to get the students, and they shut it completely down. And those are just ways that I think the students are thinking of new ways to, stop this cycle of genocide.
Yeah, I'd say if my education has taught me anything, it's that there's a role for everyone in the revolution, and it doesn't necessarily mean, being at the front lines or being the first to run into battle, whatever that might look like. And so, as that relates to the student movement, it never began or ended with the encampment. I think that the encampment was a beautiful, turning point in our history in terms of softening hearts towards the Palestinian movement, but it will continue long after the encampments. And really, I think the strength in a movement comes from how well you were able to adapt and move on from a strategy and on to the next. And to Owen's point, students are very innovative, inventive, creative. I think that's why we've been at the forefront of change for so many years, and why we continue to look at examples of student-led movements for ways of securing liberation today. And so I'd say I think that's really what the best we can do, is to continue to rely on other examples in history that have led to successes, and to not give up the hope, because though things may look fundamentally different now than they were a year ago, the crisis is still the same in Gaza, so why should we, act any different? I think that's really what keeps me grounded in my mission. Is the reality has not changed whatsoever overseas, and so the way we respond to it might need to be different. We still do need to respond to it, so it's just a matter of recalibrating.
Thank you for all of this. I want to ask about the ideas rolling around in the encampments and the movements. Obviously, the very immediate and necessary idea is that we've got to end this genocide now, and that we want whatever university we're talking about, or other institutions, to divest from collaboration. But beyond that, I think, as we saw in the movie, there's stuff that goes beyond that. Like one guy was talking about how we need to talk about what the university is, and I think you actually said something about that too. But also the talk about freedom and liberation is ever present in these things. Mostly what we get through the media is nothing more than a slogan. But I assume that there's a lot more discussion about what we are for, what we are aiming for. And Owen, does this relate to your discussion about communication, how maybe we could have had better communication, and is part of that the discussion of what we were for, both then, what we could have had, and going forward?
I'm so sorry, could you clarify your question?
Sorry. I'll make my answer brief. Getting late.
If you just clarify your question really fast.
If that's okay.
Just, what kind of discussion is there and has there been about what we need to do for, beyond the immediate thing that we want to stop with is horrible? And is this part of our next steps going forward?
think, to be so frank, I think because of the state of organizing at Northwestern completely falling apart, I don't have a good answer for that right now. So this is something that I do want to share with, freshmen that are coming in now, and future classes that are going to be coming in, sharing the lessons that we learned and hopefully empowering them to reclaim SJP, build it back up to be an organization that is strong in its convictions and its goals. I think there's been a bit of an identity crisis with SJP in the last year, so I honestly can't speak to those sorts of discussions because I haven't been present for that, but I do strongly feel the responsibility of sharing the history and our goals and hopes, that were with us before the encampment with underclassmen right now, so that they may, carry the banner forward.
Oh, okay. All right. I just sort of got a two-part question. Real brief on this, but I'm mostly going to reveal what grade I am. Now, first of all, you were just talking about SJ. My first question is, you were just talking about SJP, and I wanted to ask you, what does that stand for? Second part.
I'll clarify really quickly. I'm sorry. This is like student jargon. SJP is Students for Justice in Palestine.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a student organization campaigns for Palestine. Okay. All right. Now, the other part of my question was, now I couldn't read the text at the end of the movie because my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. And what did it say?
You want to go for it?
You want it? No, go ahead.
I haven't seen the movie before, so.
Yeah, if you know the answers.
It was telling that 3,100 students had been arrested. I know that was one of the statistics it pulled. Do you have an answer to the other part?
Yeah, it mentions the number of students who were arrested. It mentioned Mahmoud Khalil,
Yes.
who was still being incarcerated. And I'm sorry?
Yes.
Mahmoud Khalil was very prominently featured in the film. Okay, this needs to be, I think, our last question.
This actually isn't a question, it's an announcement.
Okay.
I'm really glad that all of you are here today. And I think what's lacking here is the follow-up, because there's clearly a community here. There are clearly people who care very much about what's going on. And I think the question of this gentleman who was here earlier, like, what do we do now? It meant probably something personal, like, what are we, people who are gathered here, what do we do now? So I have a couple of suggestions for you. One, there's a protest on Saturday at 2 o'clock. Please all show up. We need more white people there. We really need more white people there. Secondly, I'm happy to give you all the information finally afterwards. Secondly, on Monday at Evanston High School at 7 o'clock p.m., there is a board meeting where they're going to be discussing ongoing discussion of a case of a Jewish teacher who's being reprimanded for posting a poster in his classroom made by a Jewish artist. He's being reprimanded for anti-Semitism. We all came and we spoke in his defense 2 weeks ago, but there were several of us. Right now, there are going to be more, and there are going to be more Zionists, and there are going to be more people screaming anti-Semitism. We need all of the community to show up. Evanston High School, 7 p.m. on Monday, in defense of the teacher. Please prepare less than 3-minute speech, saying what you've learned here, saying why you're there, and let's come up and let's keep doing something real. We can't no longer rely on the students to do this work for us. We need to show up as a community. So let's do it.
I just really wanted to quickly echo what has just been said. I know that for us, we have a very closely knit community and goal with our universities regarding what we have to do. But as adults, people who are members of their communities and well-established, maybe have children who attended high schools. They're well-organized Zionists, like, frankly, fascist groups who organize to go to these types of school meetings and bombard these schools with their narratives. And that's all they hear if we don't show up. So if you're not involved and you want to be involved in a type of like tangible way, I do say, please do go to your town hall meetings. Please do talk to these school board meetings if you've had children. This is actionable ways that your voice is not drowned out. Yeah, thank you.
I really want to thank Owen and Sama once more for sharing their stories with us. And thank you to all of you for coming out. We appreciate you. Thank you.
It's Marianne Everhart.
Oh, hi,
I
Marianne.
just want to say hi. It's so good to see you in person.
Good to see you too, as well.
So good to see you in person. Really. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know how much you know about Northwestern. In person, like I've seen it.
I know. Not on Zoom. I know. What a concept.
Yeah. So thank you.
It's good to see you. Yeah.
This business of anti-Semitism, Hebrew University just released a paper 3 weeks or so ago saying all the occupiers of Palestine are they're not sometimes. So I doesn't say define Semitism for me. If you're accusing me of defining it.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah.
The calder went to the tool hall.
Yes.
You're one of my heroes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Oh, hey, Layla. Hi. So good to see you.
So good to see you too.
Yeah.
How are you?
Hanging in there.
Yeah,
How about you?
Hanging in there too.
Yeah. You, one of my heroes, because you show up more than anyone.
I think you're a hero too.
We all absolutely. Thanks for coming out tonight. It was good, wasn't it? Yeah.
Just the community of the students, they wouldn't back down.
Absolutely.
Yes. I was also see if I can find out about, the 7 p.m. Evanston board.
Yeah.
Do you have to sign up like you do at City Hall?
Leslie Williams would be a great person to ask about it.
I got an email from her.
Yeah. Didn't you say in her email?
Like